What's going on, GBA fans? My name is Berk, and today we bring you the last week of the power rankings for the GBA Season 6. And with me, for the last time this season, thankfully, it's Trav.
Is it thankful because I'm still here and you love me?
No, it's thankful that this is the last time I have to record with you.
I
don't think you got that. I don't think you got that.
I am very dumb.
Yes, you are. So anyway, this week was definitely a week. This video, hopefully, will be shorter, mostly because we don't have too many things to say about these battles, and one of the battles at the time we were recording this does not seem to have been played. So, at number 16, we have the San Jose Sharpedos. They didn't play. Again, at the time of recording, maybe by the time this goes up, they will play their match, but at the time, this is, you get it. It didn't really matter if he played and won anyway. He was actually still going to be last place due to his differential anyway. And at number 15, we have his opponent, the New Orleans Pelipers. Same things apply, although if he were to win, he would move up, mostly due to differential, because if he won 5 and 7 with some differential, he would move past a few teams. Alright, so finally the first team we can talk about. 14, we have the San Francisco Giants. So, for Gio, there's some cool playing. He was bringing some interesting things. I like to set up Latias, and he knew what he needed to get rid of at team matchup to get it to actually set up, like Honchkrow, because it wasn't actually able to hit the Honchkrow, which is a problem I've seen him do with Latias in the past. Like last season, he brought a mono-attacking Dragon Pulse Latias against a team with Azumarill, and gave free switch-ins to it. This was not really a serious battle due to both teams being out of the playoffs, and you'll see this is kind of a theme for teams who have battles that don't really matter this week. And I like how he called out almost all of Battler X's tricks. He saw the Sunny Day Heatran coming, he saw the Relic Song Meloetta coming. However, he brought dual Scarfers, which meant that he wasn't going to be able to get much momentum this match. He doesn't seem to run, I don't want to say the correct Scarfers, but the Scarfers that he usually brings, when he brings it in, he loses a lot of momentum during that time. And he just couldn't deal with all the gimmicks that Battler X brought, and then lost to Trick Room, Belly Drum, Slowbro, although not the Belly Drum. I like that he recognized the problems in his team this season, a lot doing with the versatility that he's comfortable with using, and he needs to look at what made his team so good last season and try to emulate that.
Yeah, I have very little to add. He mentioned in planning, he sort of built a serious team, but he probably didn't put as much effort in as in other weeks. Again, a lot of people did that. People get caught off guard by gimmicks. It happens. I would go all you can see that he might bring Trick Room and Slowbro because he brought it last week, but at the same time, Battle X just brought a bunch of ridiculous things. He seemed really convinced that the Venusaur wasn't going to come, and then when it did, he struggled with it, but at the same time, I think if it had been a more serious battle, the Venusaur probably wouldn't have been brought, so yeah, I'm not going to say anything more because the game literally didn't matter.
And speaking of games that literally didn't matter, we have his opponent at number 13, the Milwaukee Sawsbucks.
Battler X brought so many gimmicks, and the nicknames were a thing that happened.
I think he just slammed his head against the keyboard for that one.
Yeah, he said something about, nicknaming by slamming your head against the keyboard and then adding in vowels to try and make it into a word or something. Anyway, the thing with Battler X is, as we've been saying all season, he brings gimmicks, and when the gimmicks work, they work really, really well. And a lot of them happened to work this week. The Venusaur put in a huge amount of work against Gio's team. Crit Crow managed to get off big damage on things by pursuit trapping them, which I don't think Gio expected him to click as often as he did. Physical Trick Room Slowbro to clean up. I mean, if it had been special, it would have done the same thing. It's just the fact that it had Belly Drum and Aqua Tail makes it 100 times cooler.
And Iron Ball Fling. Can't forget Iron Ball Fling.
Iron Ball Fling. That's actually fantastic. When he embraces the gimmicks on his team, he does really, really well. The issue comes against good opponents who are playing as hard as they can. Either they see the gimmicks coming or it just won't do enough anyway. In this instance, I think both coaches were taking it so relaxed that it just absolutely destroyed Gio, and it has destroyed people in previous matches as well. It's just a matter of figuring out which is the right gimmick to bring for each week rather than just, I have this gimmicky set I want to try out and just throwing it on a team. But all in all, I think Battler X has shown that he can be a better coach for this team than Steve was. Almost got a positive differential for a season, which is, in terms of the Milwaukee franchise, it's insane.
I mean, let's be real, Steve was kind of trash. He had brought, Yeah, he brought a lot of gimmicks. The Crit Crow, fucking Crit Crow, and Relic Song Meloetta. I actually like that set because not many people actually see it coming, and then when it does actually show up, it outspeeds like everything and then hits actually pretty damn hard. And I don't really have much else to say. It seems when he's playing more relaxed, he just plays better. It was just overall more middle ground plays than we've seen, where he's either making the super safe play or making the super aggressive play. And this game, you know, the more relaxed, however, with the really big gimmicks, he just seems to play better instead of taking it super seriously. So he finished out the season well. I mean, he got, he won the last 3 out of his 4 games, and I hope he can pick it up when Sun and Moon comes out. So at number 12, we have the Borussia Donphan. The team planning was just amazing. Mono Lando is absolutely broken team. I mean, he literally didn't need anything else. But Lars, if you're gonna run Mono Lando with Explosion to finish off the battle, you're gonna lose. If you finish with Explosion, you lose the battle. And then he doesn't even bring it. I was so excited by that prep. He doesn't even bring it. I like the Trick Room team. It was interesting, and he built well around it for Mega Zam to clean up at the end. He played well with the Trick Room, able to get in his threats as often as he could. You know, you got the Crawdon in, he got the Drudagon in, healing Wishing into the Drudagon, really good stuff. I think overall, he played really well. And using a gimmick, and I call Trick Room a gimmick because it's just not very good, just because it doesn't last very long. The unfortunate part is, you know, he makes some assumptions about his opponent's team. Like, when he saw that the Gyarados is adamant, and then assumed it had to have been Scarf, and then it wasn't. It's those assumptions that can cost you a mon, like Scizor, and Scizor didn't even get any damage off, which, if it actually had gotten the Bullet Punch off in the Gyarados, it would have died. Post-Wakanberry. You know, you can kind of see the Wakanberry on the Gyarados coming because Envy loves to run either Wakan or Yachi Berry on his Gyarados. Lars, despite not having a winning record this season, he played very well. All of his games were very close. This was no exception, and I know he was trying out something new, and I think it worked out pretty well. Despite being low in the power rankings, I think he's still really...
Lars' season could have been very, very different. There were a couple of very, very small things that didn't go his way in a couple of matches. And he did get something that did go his way, like the crit against Nick. So he had a season where a lot of games came down to a little bit of luck one way or the other, which means he's being really competitive. He wasn't able to really destroy anyone, but he was also really, really close with all the good coaches. In this game, I think it showed that he can effectively run gimmicks. I think sometimes he's been a little bit scared to run a full team gimmick, and he tends to bring a lot of similar sets to games. And then this game, he was like, you know what, I'm going to try and do something a bit different. And it was really, really good. Against a team that wasn't coached by Envy, it might have worked, but Envy had a lot of experience. He knows how to play around Troop. I think the gimmick worked really well, and I'd like to see him bring some of that creativity into his matches earlier in the season. Gimmicks are a bit more of a risk, something which is less standard but could potentially destroy your opponent. But if you have a team of 4 mons that can deal well enough with most things in your opponent's team, and then 2 mons to orchestrate a gimmick, that can be the difference between winning and losing, and it can allow you to sweep a team completely. And I'd like to see him do that more in the normal season where games actually matter. That said, as you mentioned, he is still a really good coach, and I look forward to seeing what he does next season.
Also, shout out to HP Electric Technician Scizor. I didn't mention that before.
That was cool.
Should have brought Mono Lando. Would have won. So at my number 11 and your number 10, we have the Pittsburgh Piratas. And why don't you talk about Tup?
Tup and Cooper had another fantastic game. The last game they played came down to doubling between Gliscor and Mega Pidgeot and Greninja and whatever. Early game, Tup had so much momentum. The Lipard put a surprising amount of pressure onto Cooper's team. He managed to cripple the Gliscor, get some big hits off, burn some things, etc. But then Cooper did what Cooper always does and just sort of stabilizes, and the Gliscor was still able to do work even after it lost its Toxicorp, which was insane. And then the momentum kind of just completely shifted when Tangrowth got frozen, because even though it was still able to switch in and take hits, because it was frozen for, I mean, it wasn't frozen for particularly long, I think it was only like 2 turns, but 2 turns of damage would have been enough to take out the Staraptor, which ended up causing him huge problems because every time it came in, he basically had to sack something. That would have been the difference potentially in winning or losing this game.
Tup, 10 out of 10 thumbnail. Yeah, as you said, he played the early game really well. I mean, I think Tup can do bold plays well. I don't think he likes doing it, but he can. The Flame Orb, listen, I know he couldn't predict Flame Orb Clefable, but once he saw the Flame Orb, it should go through your mind like a few things. It's either Guts Clefable, which doesn't make sense, Quick Feet Clefable, which doesn't make sense, Psycho Shift, and I don't think it gets Psycho Shift, or Fling. Like, those are the things that are just, once you see the Flame Orb, probably has the fling. So you could probably imagine that he's going to want to bring Clefable in at some time to fling off the Choice Scarf. I like how he really thought through his moves carefully. It was just like, he was really thinking about this game a lot, and despite making some misplays like with the Excadrill, he was able to think through his moves very carefully. You got to pay attention to how much health your mons have. Excadrill literally had 1 HP, and it was not taking burn damage. You know, I said about Lars making these bold assumptions about what your opponent's mon has, and Tup did the same thing. He thought this Staraptor was indeed not scarfed, and that cost him his Mega Pidgeot. Granted, he didn't really have switch-ins, but overall, he played really well, and he's still making some bad plays, but he's so greatly improved. I mean, like, Season 4, he was in last. Season 5, he didn't have any shot at the playoffs, and now Season 6, he was shut out by 1 game. So, really, really good improvement this season, and I really hope to see him continue to improve going into Season 7. So, at my number 10 and your number 11, we have the Mew Castle United, and now for me, Mew Castle moved up quite a bit, but that's a lot due to some other teams just moving down. This was another game that neither team really was like super hard into planning, just because, again, Chimp was guaranteed playoffs, Sam was not making playoffs. Yeah, I like this planning. Getting a lot of use out of both Kyurem and Dragonite on the same team, very hard to switch into. He went in with a game plan. Hazard stack, he saw no hazard removal on Chimp's team. The only thing he had was Mega Diancie to bounce back hazards, but he was able to get off a lot of damage with Mew, make sure that the Mega Diancie could go down, and then just start hazard stack. And then once the hazards went up, it was just a matter of shuffling around his team and then letting Dragonite clean up at the end. And, you know, this is the kind of play that we can see Sam do very well, but I don't think his team necessarily complements his playstyle. And there's a lot of things that he drafted that he realizes he doesn't like to use, like Mega Banette, because you see him, he's never brought it, like, since, like, the first 3 weeks. That's why I didn't like it in the post-draft, just because it's an unknown. Sam really turned the season around. We think about it, he's 5-7, but if you think about it this way, he went 5-2 in the last 7 weeks. That's really damn good. Sam definitely shows that he's a very, very good competitor. If he's going to compete next season in the GBA, I'm sure he's going to draft a much better team for himself, and he's going to do a lot better with it.
We all knew Sam was a good competitor. He had a really rough start to the season, and a draft which he didn't like. Ended up just not being comfortable with a bunch of the mons, and that happens. But as he said, once he figured out how to use the things he wanted to use and what not to bring, he played really, really well. And he's beaten some really solid teams and had some really, really good games in the second half of this season. So in his draft analysis, way throwing back 12 weeks ago, he mentioned the reason he got both dragon types was because he wanted to have both of them on the same team, one to wall break and one to clean up. And you'll notice the games where he's won, that's almost always been how it's worked out, and this game was no different. He managed to use the Suicune to great effect. Like, it's one of the best performances I've seen from a Suicune, because he could just sit in and tank hits from most of Chimp's team, and then just raw things out and just get more and more hazard damage up until the point where D-Knight could just clean up with E-Speed. I like the Mew set. It was effective. He brought less coverage than last time and more bulk, but because of Mew being Mew, Chimp had to try and scout around the coverage and let it get a lot of damage on things. That Spadef drop on the Magneton potentially could have changed some things, but hacks happens. All in all, I think Sam showed that he is actually a very good competitor, and no one should sleep on him for Season 7 or whatever else happens with the GBA.
Alright, so at number 9, we have the Tampa Bay lose weights. So, you talk about Mono.
Mono literally got knocked out of playoffs because of a roll this week. That sucks. To be fair, he could have played better earlier in the game to not have that happen, not have it come down to I think it was 60-40 or so he didn't give himself the best chance to win, but he still gave himself a better chance to win than George, and George won. Because of that, Mono now misses out on playoffs by literally the narrowest of margins. He brought a offensive Garchomp again, just similar to, I believe, last time against George, he brought the sub-Salic Berry one, and this time he brought just straight up Scarf, so he didn't need to do all the setup to get the speed. He would just click Earthquake or Dragon Claw and just do damage. I like how he went for Dragon Claw in case George brought an Air Balloon mon, because I wonder why he would be paranoid about Air Balloon. But, I mean, it was smart because Earthquake would only done a little bit more damage, and you do just mitigate that risk. Noticing he doesn't have a ground immunity, Air Balloon or Sugar Berry is something he could very well run on something, so going for Dragon Claw to sort of scout that out was a smart move. Brought a lot of pretty cool sets, like the Belly Drum Life Orb Azumarill, I'm not too sold on because, I mean, at +6 do you really need a Life Orb to kill anything? It's a +6 zoom rule. And I get that the Life Orb could have been before Belly Drum or because it just needed big damage on things. But the issue was it would be taking a lot of recoil, and as it happened in the match, the recoil ended up pretty much costing it. If you hadn't had Life Orb and had Expert Belt, or if you'd had Pixie Plate or whatever, it might have helped. It's sort of hard to judge that kind of thing. Really the main issue is it got toxic early and he wasn't able to get rid of the rocks, so it just took rocks damage every time it came in, took too much chip damage, and then it was a roll to die to Ice Shard as opposed to just straight up living it. There was a sequence of plays where Mono was saying this is a 50-50 between me and George, and kept making this safe play, which put him behind to the point where he went, well, I have to now start making risky plays, and that brought him back into it. The issue is, on a couple of those 50-50s, I'm not 100% sure that they were actually 50-50s. Like, that's what Pokemon is. You have to go, is my opponent going to make a prediction? So every turn, if you're talking like that, is a 50-50 because it's does your opponent make a prediction or not. A couple of those predictions wouldn't have been massively bold. They just would have got him a little bit more momentum and lost him a little bit less momentum. And because of it just happened, I think 3 or 4 times in a row, he just lost a little bit of momentum, and put George on the front foot again. He managed to bring it back, but he was in a winning position in that game and then let George get back into it. If he'd managed to maintain that, he could have just straight up won this game and would now be in playoffs. You could also argue that Mono is not in playoffs because he took over a team in week 2, a team that had already lost a game with a not great differential, and that he didn't draft his own team and all sorts of things. So I think this season doesn't really show how good Mono can be. You know, he gave everyone else a head start, essentially, and he still came really, really close to making playoffs, so it's just unfortunate that that turned out the way it did, and I look forward to seeing him next season.
Trick Bronzong with Choice Band. That's a cool set, and he played it really risky. He did that on a Mamoswine. That could have potentially been devastating, but he knew the Mamo was switching out. The early game, as he got a lot of momentum, and then mid-game, he just started letting it up, because he wasn't really making the plays that he was making in the beginning of the game. He was just kind of, okay, now I'm just going to play entirely safe. And yeah, at the end, he loses to a roll. Like, it sucks. He could have won 0-0, but, you know, it happens. The Life Orb, Azu, you know, it's cool, but he said he didn't need the 4th move, but, like, Knockoff is a thing. Knockoff is one of those moves that literally has no downside for clicking it. It's a team that he didn't draft, and he did really well with it, so Mono is really good, and if he's back next season, I think he would do better with a team that he knows how to use because he drafts it himself. So anyway, at number 8, we have the New York Metapods. And Dan had really solid planning. He knew this game was really important, and I think he planned probably some of the best he has all season. However, he realized the chance he was setup fodder, but brought it anyway. I get that he needed to switch into Kyurem, and I'm glad that he was aware that it could easily be setup fodder to Kyurem. You know, you gotta be careful with that, but, you know, the Kyurem wasn't there anyway, so it's kind of a moot point. I like the reasoning for Special Victini. Don't bring V-Create so as not to lose momentum. Don't really think of V-Create as a move that loses you momentum because, you know, it's a base 180 stab fire move. So it's like, you gotta kill something, but he didn't want to go for it, so he doesn't offer things free switch-ins. I think knowing the score of Mono's match beforehand really helped him out with this. He knew Mono lost, so he's like, I do have a definite shot and I need to absolutely 100% win this. And you go in with that mindset, and it's gonna be very different than I don't have a shot at playoffs, so winning this match doesn't really matter. I like how you use Mega Ult to wear down quite a few of Nick's team, and really due to no wall breakers by Nick, you know, Dan was just able to let Chansey wall things, and that's pretty much how this match went. Chansey sat in the field, and Nick didn't really have ways to deal with it, so it just kind of walled everything. He held a really good amount of momentum. He made plays he normally makes, made some good predictions early game that got him some momentum, and Nick was just never able to take it back. He scored a very big win, and he was able to eke his way into the playoffs. So hopefully, you know, good luck to Dan in the playoffs. This is his 3rd time in a row, so we'll see how he does.
This performance from Chansey was reminiscent of his Season 4 team. The set he brought was still set up fodder. He recognised that, so he recognised that if Kyurem was being brought in on the Chansey, he needed to bring something else in just to get big damage on it, or break a sub, or whatever. Because Nick didn't bring anything to set up on the Chansey, and didn't really bring anything to break through it, it ended up basically being the MVP of this match because it just destroyed Nick. Like, there was nothing he could really do to stop it, and it just sat there and got damage on things, to the point where the rest of his team could clean up. I still like that he does his calcs every single turn, and it's not just calcing the move that he's going for, it's calcing every move, calcing moves for future turns, thinking multiple steps ahead to try and work out what his best moves are at the time, and how much damage he needs to get on particular things to be able to win and stuff like that. If Darren plays like this consistently, he's going to be hard to beat. Again, if you look at the second half of this season, he has picked up so much. Last season, he did the exact same thing. He snuck himself into the playoffs by a very, very thin margin, and then won the whole thing. So he could end up doing it again, who knows. Certainly, if he plays like he did this week and the past couple of weeks, I can see him winning.
So at number 7, we have the Atlanta Holuchas and Fizz. So yeah, talk about Fizz.
This was a match that didn't really matter. Miguel literally said in his video that he just brought the same team because he couldn't be bothered building another team. Fizz just kind of threw some things together and tried to have some fun. I mean, it's hard to talk about a game when neither coach really tried. Kekleon did things. I think it was a good match just for showing Fizz that Kekleon can actually be really good, and he might be more open to bringing it in the playoffs, and that could be the difference in some games, because Kekleon is not only good, but a lot of people don't really know how to deal with it well, because a lot of the coaches play higher tiers more often than lower tiers. Proteon in League format is just an insanely good ability. So even though Kekleon is not the strongest of mons, it can really, really abuse that. He didn't bring hazard removal because he didn't feel like it. He wanted to bring SD Mega Scizor and didn't want to bring Salamence for whatever reason, and so his team just got whittled down. That's more of a problem with the team, like not just the team he built this week, but his overall team. It is a bit easy to hazard stack on. In particular, teams don't particularly have to worry about their own hazard removal because he only has Rhyperior, and so as I've been saying most of the season, he is going to lose the hazard war in a lot of games, so he needs to try and come up with ways of either beating his opponent before that can really affect him, or of making it irrelevant by having something that just completely runs through their team anyway. I did like when he has Weavile versus Mega Scizor, and they're both having flashbacks to last time they played, and Fizz is just like, nope, I'm not going to let it happen. I'm going to click Bullet Punch. I'm not letting this Weavile kill me. And sure enough, goes for Bullet Punch, Weavile dies as Miguel goes for Natural Gift. So Fizz's stubbornness pays off again. His team was really just outmatched. Like, compared to last time we played Miguel, like, he brought some serious-ish sets, but it wasn't really a serious team. He didn't really put the same effort into building it. When you have a less good team, essentially, it is difficult to win from that position because you're starting with a handicap. So I didn't really take too much from Fizz's battle this week, other than he tried to have some fun.
I mean, the biggest thing I took from this battle is no Volcanion.
Yeah, he hates Volcanion now.
Fizz.
Apparently it's a terrible mode.
Yeah, I know. Like, seeing how it's performed this season, I'd say it's a decent wall breaker, but it's not what people thought it was going to be. Yay, Kekleon. It did things. I like when it does things. Its hazards fucked him over. And Toxic Spikes wore down things, set up for Talonflame to kind of sweep. Granted, Talonflame didn't need to, because Fizz tried to just set up in Goodra's face twice, with both times going for Swords Dance, and neither time worked. Fizz having fun with a lot of setup, and it didn't work out. So I know when it comes to playoffs that he is going to put more time into his planning, and probably more time into the playing. At number 6, we have the Utah Jasmine, and now this match did matter, as we talked about top. So, Flame Orb, Fling, Clefable, Slow Clap. I liked how he played it too. He knew that the Rotom was going to go for Will-O-Wisp, so he switched in Clefable to get burned so the Tup wouldn't know that he had Flame Orb. That's really thinking ahead. You know, we talk about how hiding information is really good, and that was like a fantastic way to hide that he was actually Flame Orb Flame. In the beginning, you know, he got like wildly outplayed, having his Gliscor pretty much crippled and whatnot, but as we said when we were talking about Tup, you know, Cooper has a way of stabilizing the match, making sure that his bulk can then not bring the momentum to his side, but just kind of halt his opponent's momentum, such that then we can kind of bring the battle to an even playing field, and then he can start to gain some of his own momentum. And he's able to cripple, like, Tup's biggest threats, like the Excadrill. He was able to cripple the Tangrowth through a freeze, so, you know, that's the thing. And, you know, he did get a little bit lucky, you know, the low roll on the Gliscor also. It really helped push the momentum to Cooper and allow him to just kind of push through Tup's team. I like how it was always in his mind he had to make sure to whittle down Tup's team so that Greninja could sweep at the end. It was just like, okay, Pidgeot, get it down to 75%, that way Life Orb, Greninja can kill it, get this thing down so I can kill Greninja. He had a really good forethought of the end game, and then he capitalized on some definite misplays by Tup, and then played the end game well, preserving his win con, and he's able to make the playoffs because of it. So good luck to Cooper in the playoffs.
The first time Cooper has made playoffs in the GBA, I believe. So it's good to see that, at least.
No. He contests that he would have definitely made playoffs had Season 3 gone to playoffs.
He says he would have won Season 3, but so do, like, 4 people.
No. Cooper would have won Season 3, so...
The first time Cooper's going to have to play a playoff match, in any case. The main thing you notice about Cooper this week is how well he thought through some of those plays. Like, you mentioned the Flame Orb Clefable one, where he switches it into the Willow to preserve the surprise of Flame Orb. But also, when he sets up rocks, when he's letting the extra will itself down with the Rapid Spin, like, he's sitting in there with the Gliscor, which can't do anything, and clicking Toxic repeatedly, because if Extra keeps clicking Rapid Spin, it's taking Burn Recoil, and the more Burn Recoil it takes, the less times it can switch in on rocks, and less times it can switch in general. So he sat there knowing that even though Top was getting chip damage on him, I mean, it was like 3 HP a turn, so it's not really significant chip damage anyway. He can just keep clicking Toxic. As soon as Top makes a switch, he can get the Toxic on it, except then he changes to Earthquake, just going, oh look, he's just going to sack Excadrill, and Top makes the play there. But at that point, Excadrill died to rocks, and that's Top's hazard removal dies to rocks. And once rocks are up, things like the Mega Pidgeot were in range, and it was just good chip damage on everything, so he then made sure to get the rocks up with his Clefable, killing both Rotom and Excadrill in one move, basically. It was all just really well thought out about how he needed to win this game, and how he could get into that position. He got a little bit of luck, which helped with that getting momentum back thing, because as we mentioned when talking about Top was way ahead in the early game. He got completely on top of Cooper, but Cooper is one of the few people who doesn't panic when that sort of thing happens. Cooper is really, really good at staying calm and making the correct play, not panicking and just throwing mons out there to try and do some damage or whatever. If he plays really, really well, he can win. It's going to be difficult, like I can say, for everyone, but I mean, no one's out of it at this point. I want to see Cooper go far. He is one of those people that you either love him or you hate him, but I enjoy watching him play, and particularly this week, it was really, really good forethought just on most of the plays. After his first couple of turns, that side to really come out, and he managed to win because of it.
At number 5, we have the San Francisco Arcaniners, so why don't you talk about George?
George, I have a question for you. Did you know that Hitmonchan is a Pokemon that can be drafted? Because your prep didn't. You won anyway, but it was a much closer game than it would have been if you even had a little bit of prep for it. It's one of those things where it's difficult to prep for that many mons. Like 11 mons, it's really hard to bring a team of 6 that can beat any of those 11. But he literally had nothing for it, which isn't the best way to be. You generally want to have something that can switch in. You can bring a wall that can switch into as many things in your opponent's team as possible, and he just didn't have anything that could really deal with the Hitmonchan well. The game managed to get to a point where he could kill it off, but at that point he'd lost a lot of momentum, and then had to make some really, really aggressive plays to try and bring it back, and he did. He managed to make the predictions that Mono wasn't willing to, and get himself back into this game, and put himself back in a winning position, and then he switches Manaphy into a playoff and dies. He identified that Mono was playing really safely, and went, well, he's probably just going to go for the Aqua Jet because he's been making the safe play every time, and switched into Manaphy, but at that point Mono's mindset had changed because he'd now gone behind, etc. So that's just, it's not really a criticism more than just a comment, because that's how Pokemon goes. But, I mean, all season, George has just been having lots of really, really close games with people, and it doesn't inspire the most confidence. Like, watching someone get 6-0'd, it's really hard not to be like, wow, this person is just completely destroying them. Whereas George often seems to come away with, well, I won, but a couple of things went my way, and I made, 1 or 2 really good plays at the right time, which managed to win the game for him. And, I mean, if he continues to do that and continues to win close games, then he will win the championship, but it's less convincing than someone who is clearly comfortably ahead of the opponent and just able to stop them from getting any sort of momentum. George almost always has a section during the mid-game where his opponent gets back on top, and it's an arm wrestle. He just manages to somehow win most of those really close games.
I like this prep. Sub Manaphy, no Tail Glow. I know people are like, no Tail Glow, but that's all that Manaphy does, and it does. Good luck in the playoffs to George, and hopefully he's been having close games because he's been playing against really good people, so you can't really fault him for that, but still.
Yeah, I mean, everyone's been playing against good people. That's the thing with this league.
Yeah, and the playoffs is just going to get harder, so good luck to all the coaches in the playoffs, because all of y'all are good. So at my number 4 and your number 3, we have the Real Moril. I honestly don't have too much to say about Miguel, because he didn't really prep much for this week, just like Fizz hadn't prepped much for the week. And again, this is not going to be something that happened in the playoffs, because this match literally didn't matter. Only thing that would have changed is who do they play in playoffs, and I don't think either of them really cared who they played.
I think Fizz actually wanted to lose that when he got to play Chimp, and he thought he had a better matchup against Chimp, I think was the...
Pretty good reasoning. Miguel, you underestimated Kecleon. How fucking dare you? Adam is going to be so upset that you underestimated Kecleon. It was a rocky start. Not mispredicting, but just kind of underestimating the Kecleon, but he set up hazards, hazard stacked, things got worn down, and he knew that if he got the P2 and Rhyperior down, that he could pretty much just clean up with Talonflame. But I guess the biggest points are he did not let Fizz set up in his face. He clicked the right moves at the right time. There's not much to say about this match. Neither of them were taking it too seriously, and he managed to come out ahead due to good hazard stacking and then, at least decent prep.
The combination of Roserade and Mega Blastoise is a really good hazard stacking option, and if he's able to identify when that can be useful against other teams, it can potentially win him games, because he then has powerful mons and some fast mons to clean up, like Weavile, Talonflame, etc. Miguel won. I moved him up, mostly because I didn't like how Nick played, but we'll talk about that next. We'll see how he goes in playoffs.
At my number 3 and number 4, we have the Boston Red Sox. At the time of recording this, Nick hasn't uploaded. Probably by the time this goes up, he'll have uploaded, but I'm not really going to talk about much except for celebrate Jolteon. Best play ever, 10 out of 10 play. And he was wildly unprepared for Chansey, so he lost.
It's hard to know his thought processes. We can see that, obviously, he didn't really have much Chansey. He had the Sub-Punch Alakazam, but, it's a Sub-Punch Alakazam. Felt like he really didn't think Dan was going to bring it, or thought that the Zam could deal with it better, and it really couldn't.
Now, if it was that Alolan Alakazam that's pure fighting type, then maybe you'd be able to deal with Chansey.
But, we're still in the Horas season, so Sun and Moon can wait.
Boo.
I get that Dan has been playing less bulky as the season goes on, but Dan still brings semi-stall and bulky offense in most games, and Nick's team should match up really well against that. He has a lot of just crazy powerful mons. He can smash through people's wall cores, but he didn't. He didn't bring anything really that could break through Dan's team, and that showed during the match. He just wasn't able to do enough damage to things, and Dan just slowly whittled him down and won. But given he said he was playing this super seriously, it's a disappointing showing of how he can play, and he needs to pick up again next week if he wants to try and stay in the playoffs.
My number 2 and your number 1, we have the Philadelphia Scissors, so why don't you take Jim?
Once again, he basically said he wasn't really going to plan hard for this match because it didn't matter. He just didn't look as much into what Sam could be bringing, etc. He brought some interesting sets, like Rain Dance, Politoed. My guess is he wanted to bring Water Absorb, so if it was Crocoon, it would just be hard-walled. But I think Sam is smart enough to not bring Crocoon against a team that has a Water Absorber. The planning really set him back, and part of the reason I still have him at number 1 is because I don't really regard this match as a reflection on his season. I think the rest of the season has been a lot better. He wasn't trying as hard. Most people weren't, and that's the problem with this week. He expected a lot more coverage on the Mew, but Mew is sort of hard to guess what it's going to do in that sense. Got a little bit unlucky, which cost him some momentum, then basically lost to E-Speed D-Knight.
He didn't bring any hazard removal. That's what happens when you don't bring any hazard removal aside from Mega Diancie, which is not a great hazard deterrent. Played kind of poorly around the Mew, but then against the Mew, you gotta scout the set. Rain Dance Politoed. I get it shuts down Crocoon, but Encore does the same exact thing, and you have automatic weather. I felt like this was a lot the same thing that Fizz went through. Hazards, no hazard removal, team gets whittled down, and then a sweeper just comes in at the end and cleans up. In this case, it's E-Speed Dragonite, and E-Speed Dragonite does things, and it's strong. I don't think this is going to be indicative of how Chimp plays in the playoffs. He's going to put in a lot of time, and I know he's going to really want to win. I have it at number 2 just because MV won and Chimp lost this week. And at my number 1 and your number 2, we have the San Diego Chimp Chargers. And this week, MV's planning was solid as always. I think he was also in the camp of, doesn't really matter what happens this week. So he wasn't planning super hard, but I like the game plan. Once he realized that Lars had Trick Room, he was like, alright, Donphan, your job is just to knock off all the life orbs. Every single life orb, it's gotta be gone by the time this match ends. And he was able to do that. Just that. And then he knows how to play around Trick Room. And he was very good at stalling out the turns of Trick Room, making sure that he made the necessary sacks. And the right sacks, as he likes to call it. It was a straightforward battle, low-stress battle. It didn't matter if he won or lost, but he did win, meaning that he is actually number 1 in the standings. And he just continues to show that he knows how to play well and plan well, and that not only can he use different styles, like we've seen him use more balance as opposed to just hyper offense, he knows how to play around various play styles, even if he doesn't necessarily plan for it. Like this week, he didn't plan for Trick Room, but he's a good enough player where he knows how to play around Trick Room. Going into the playoffs, I definitely think he's still one of, if not the best team, and I would not be at all surprised wins the entire thing. So he's at my number 1.
Yeah, I have it at number 2 mostly because most of the games this week I didn't really taken them into consideration and making the rankings. Like, the main impressive thing with MV is, as you mentioned, his ability to play around things that he didn't actually prep for, which is really difficult in League format because normally the way you deal with something is something you have come up with before the game and you just implement it. Whereas he's able to see something that would catch most people off guard and adapt to it really quickly because 1-1 has Trick Room, realised what else on the team could be a potential sweeper and that kind of thing, and played around it really, really well. It was just really impressive how his generic planning for everything Lars could bring could actually be implemented even when Lars brought something that's completely unexpected. And as you said, I wouldn't be surprised if he won. I'm still picking Chimp, I'm sticking with what I said last week, but pretty much anyone can win this at this point. That's the beauty of Pokemon. And
that is going to end the Week 12 Power Rankings for the GBA Season 6. This is, as I said in the beginning, the last week of Power Rankings. I want to thank everyone for listening to us ramble about stupid shit for 12 weeks. I'm very surprised if any of you were able to sit through all 12 weeks of this, but thank you nonetheless. It's been fun. We won't be doing any of this for playoffs, and I guess I'll mention this now, but don't take my word for it. Just, we'll keep you up to date, and probably like the GBA Twitter and something, but there should be a week off for the playoffs, so this Sunday will not be the first playoff matches, it'll be next Sunday, so just keep an eye out for information on that. Yeah, Trav, anything left to say for this last week?
Thank you for listening to my bullshit for 12 weeks. In particular, thanks for putting it with Berk. I mean, I had to do it. It must be hard for you guys as well.
Whoa, I was gonna say, you know, Trav, despite everything, it's been nice recording with you, but I'm not saying that anymore.
You literally just said it.
Well, I take it back.
I have it recorded. I can just cut out the bits where you take it back.
The power of recording and editing, people. If you would like to, leave your own Week 12 Power Rankings in the comment section below. And I hope you all enjoy the playoffs this season. It's shaping up to be a very, very exciting playoffs. But that's all we got for this week, and we will see you all next season.
Bye.